Hey there, we're going to be working on this Cub that I picked up at a yard sale or something. It was in pretty bad shape. I'm going through and checking the control surfaces to make sure they're not completely buggered. Now I'm looking for the right size battery for it. Looks like I've got one hanging out in my small battery box. But the connector doesn't look like it's going to work, so I'm going to swap that out or make an adapter. And while that's going, we're going to charge that battery. I'm getting my soldering iron ready. Got to make sure you use heat shrink. Now we're going to get the parts we need for the adapter. But it doesn't look like I've got what I need, so we're going to go with a complete replacement. Somewhere around here. Yep, there they are. Just a regular 2S balance plug. Here you can see the size difference. Pretty proud of myself for remembering to put the heat shrink on first. Although it turns out that was the wrong size and I needed something smaller. Also want something to protect the entire connector while I'm manhandling it, plugging batteries in and out. Can't be too loose, can't be too tight, you know the drill. Just marking the connector, make sure I don't connect it up backwards and destroy everything. Pretinning the ends helps a lot with these tiny connections. Doesn't take much. I use this pretty high-powered blowtorch. It's pretty great, but you gotta make sure you don't hit the foam or yourself with it. Oops. Alright, gotta put away some tools. Making these videos is about the only thing that helps my workbench stay clean. And there's the charged battery, so unplug that horrifying beeping sound and make sure that the plane starts up. Now we gotta bind it to our transmitter, so let's dig around for it.
Welcome to OpenTX.
Make a new model, put everything in it. Feel free to skip this part if you know what's up. Interestingly, there doesn't seem to be a Cub image in the radio, which surprises me greatly. This uses Spectrum, so we got to figure out how to connect up to Spectrum. This takes a while. I've edited out all the failures and added just the part that worked. Nope, I guess I didn't edit the failures out. There we go, now it's working. But the throttle doesn't work and none of the other stuff works. Here we're adding in the flaps and they're working. And here we're putting the outputs so we can track what's changing. And the throttle seems to be being sent, but it's not picking it up. So we got to do some digging. And one of the ailerons isn't working either, so we got to take the entire wing off. The previous owner has done a pretty hack job taping this thing together, so I have to remove a lot of tape. Trying to do it pretty carefully without destroying the paint and using my red and silver Sharpies where I do. Here I'm using the tip of a poking instrument to roll the tape up on to help get it off the plane gently, because you can kind of get up under the tape and then gently pry it off without destroying anything. Works pretty well. Although it is pretty tedious. There was a lot of tape on this thing. All that was one half. Now I go through the other half and remove all the tape. The wing struts are removable, but this one's pretty tight, as you can see, and it's bound up on only one of those little connectors. I'm going to use some CA debonder because I think that's what's causing the issue. And while that debonder is working, I'll get to removing even more tape. Trying to keep as much of the decals and original paintwork as I can, and finally I'm able to get the top off. I'm marking the connections that go to the wing so I don't put them together backwards when I reconnect it, and make sure they all go back in the same plug. These are really tiny fiddly things. Managed to get the thing apart. There's a little thing that holds the batteries pretty loose. One end of that connection came out, but the other is still pretty stiff in there. I keep moving it back and forth, trying to loosen it up. And out come the big guns, but they weren't the right guns, so we get different guns. That wasn't right either. Just more wiggling seemed to do it. The other side was also pretty stuck, but not quite as bad. One of the servos on the wing isn't working, so I've got some extra tiny ones. We're going to see if we can replace it.
Right?
It's nice that they put the model numbers on these things so you can kind of match them up. Nothing I had was perfect, but one of them seemed pretty close, so I was going to end up using that one. I'm doing some debugging at this point, swapping connections and trying to make sure that I know it is actually the servo that's broken and not something else. If we're going to be removing the servo, got to trace the wires and unsolder them and all that. It turns out I didn't have the right servo, but the right servo is $26 online, so we're going to try and figure it out. The replacement servo works, and they both work together as they should, so it's time to take out the old one with a disconcerting snap. Before that, I'm going to check and make sure I'm getting voltage, and after a little bit of checking, it looks like I'm not getting voltage, so I'm going to desolder the wires and do some more digging. So I've got to get the very fine tip on the soldering iron because those are very tiny connections. Still not getting any power. So now I'm checking the control board, making sure the control board has power, and it does. It's showing 4.5 volts, which is what these servos run on. And now I'm checking continuity, making sure that the wires aren't broken. using some needles to get inside those very tiny connectors. And it turns out that one of those wires is cut clean through. And it's hidden under a huge glob of glue. And I'm trying to pry things loose and get to it. I'll let me, from the moment, explain it to you. The ground wire that was cut off. Looks like in a previous repair someone had just sliced straight through one of the wires and not fixed it. So now we gotta poke a hole for a new wire to go through there, solder it up, heat shrink, the whole deal. But this is very tiny wire, so I'm using my smallest wire wrapping wire, which is just single strand. Trying to trim this wire very challenging, and I kind of cut it too short, so then I get purpose strippers out, and that works all right. And then some very fiddly soldering, but it seems to go okay. And heat shrink, and then got to do the other side. Cut the wire that's embedded in the glue, cut the new wire, stick them together, you know the drill. Don't forget the heat shrink. So now that wire's connected, but it's not connected to the servo anymore, so I gotta get out my helping hands and do some very fine soldering. These are magnetic attach clamps with clips on the end. They're excellent for this kind of work. I'm putting some heat shrink on the ends of the clips to protect the wires, so I'm just gonna heat shrink them, and I'm going to burn my finger, and that hurt pretty bad. So we're going to do the rest of them without putting our fingers near the torch. And now we're going to try and do this soldering job, but it's smoking a lot, so I'm going to get my fume extractor. And looks like the battery's dead. New battery. There we go. Like I said, now we're going to do some soldering, and it's very tiny stuff, for me at least. We're going to get you some excellent cinematography here. Then we're going to connect everything up, plug it in, and see if it works. Oh my god! That alto voice was me being very excited. Gotta put the tools away, or else the workbench becomes completely unusable. And since we didn't need those extra servos, they go back in the box. Now we got to attach the servo because we took it off. With all the work I did, the wires aren't long enough, so I had to separate them in order to get an extra couple millimeters of length, but it worked, barely. I noticed there's a tiny drop of glue right on the top of that big gear, so now we got to try and clean that off before it completely hardens, or it's going to make that servo completely inoperable forever. It is very fiddly. My tiniest tools were having a hard time, so I just went in with my fat fingers, and that actually seemed to work out all right. And there's the big, huge piece of fiber that was in there. Now just testing, make sure it turns, and it turns pretty cleanly, so we're happy. Now we have to program the servo. It was originally programmed correctly, but I'm not sure what happened, and now it's not working in the correct direction. The way you're supposed to do this is by making a servo programming cable. All it does is switch between 4 different states when you plug it in. So I had to cycle between a few different states before I got it to the alternating and non-linear throw, and then I hold that as a spare part in my servo box with the little servos, just in case I need it again. And of course little things are wrong, like a little bit of wiggliness going on in there. I'm using E6000, but I actually learned that it's not good for this foam. I thought it was good for everything, but if you look closely, it's actually eaten away the foam a little bit. So don't use that on whatever this foam is. Now we gotta attach the plane back together. So I'm just using regular packing tape, and it does not take much, just a couple tiny pieces. One on each side, one in the back. Oh, but wait, there's another piece of tape hiding out there that I need to remove first. I'm going to use Blenderm for the front because it needs to go over some complex curves. It also takes the marker easier, so it'll paint over and stay red instead of having the paint wear off very quickly with the regular packing tape. And reattaching the servo cover so an errant speck of dust doesn't destroy the airplane again. And the other servo cover had a little bit of issues as well, so fixing that up. Reattaching those irritating struts went a little bit easier the second time, but still pretty frustrating. Now giving it the final test, powering it on, hooking it up. Left, right, up, down. Yep, looking good. Yeah, there's the motor, looking good, and flaps are good, but they're pretty abrupt, so let's change it. So now it's slow flaps. That works out pretty good. Now we just need to go fly it.